I've got some good news for you. Arcades are not dead. So, if you've dreamed of creating games that creatively integrate specialized hardware and are installed in public spaces, then this is the talk for you. Today I will be talking about creating games that in many cases now fill the roles that coin-op arcades used to. These are games that are installed in public spaces and meant to attract players to a destination to play. As the talk title says, this is Lessons from the Field. I'm Allison Salmon, and for 2.5 years I was Director of Game Programming for Creative Kingdoms, a wholly owned subsidiary of Great Wolf Resorts. Creative Kingdoms creates live-action role-playing games. These attractions are both for Great Wolf Resorts and for outside clients. And the games use a blend of heavily themed locations, specialized hardware, and the magic of SQL to take players on an adventure where they discover treasures, meet magical creatures, fight dragons and goblins, and occasionally launch rockets. However, Creative Kingdoms is not the only people who make these kind of games. It's just one example. We have seen that there's been like an explosion of new immersive technology in family entertainment centers, amusement parks, resorts, malls, and standalone locations. So, what are these kind of games? Escape rooms. So, last count, there was at least 4 escape rooms in Madison alone. If you go to a tourist area, there's many, many more. They're just popping up everywhere. There's VR-cades like The Void. If you haven't checked out this company, go do it. They're making a Star Wars VR experience for Disney. They just made a Ghostbusters one. They use their proprietary tech and a built-out location to create an immersive experience. There's micro amusement parks, like this up-and-coming one from 2-Bit Circus, which will open in LA. Also Dave & Buster's, things we're more familiar with that take the coin-op arcades and just step it up to the next level. And there's, of course, other live-action role-playing games like Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom at Disney World. All of these experiences have one thing in common. They are immersing the player in an experience that they can't easily replicate at home. So, how do you make immersive experiences and attractions? First, I'm going to talk a little bit about design considerations for these kind of games. And then I'm going to talk a little about the technology used to create the games. This is going to be a really brief overview because I've only got 30 minutes. But just like with any other game, one of the first things to consider is who you are making the game for. For games as an attraction, you are designing for the player, but you also have to take into consideration that you're designing for the operator of the game as well. I wanted to move that later, but I didn't get to. So let's talk about designing for the player first. You can design the gameplay of these games a lot like any other traditional game. So I'm not going to rehash design principles about roles and goals or like what your player is doing in the game. You can also use really standard tools like the Unity game engine. All of Creative Kingdom's new stuff, the front end was Unity. So I'm not going to talk about those because those aren't really specific to this area. What I will talk about is the few things that are different that you have to take into consideration about where and how these games are being played. So the first one is, since the games are being installed in a public space with lots of other attractions, that also means lots of other distractions. So there may be other rides they want to go on. They may be tired because they've been touristing around, walking across the park. And poor little Coraline may be in need of a nap. This is my daughter, by the way. No children were harmed in the making of this presentation. So you have to take all of that into consideration. You're only going to get a really short amount of time to impress your player. And because of that, it also has to be a very intuitive experience to pick up and play. They're not going to try it again if they don't like it. So at most, the playtime you're going to get is a couple of hours. Usually what you're going to get is like a few minutes, 15 minutes at most in a chunk. And that experience has to be memorable during that experience, during that time period. There is an upside to this short amount of gameplay. Usually when we're designing for traditional games, desktop, console, you're worried about like, do I have enough game here to keep somebody involved for like 20 hours? Here you can focus on making a really, really quality experience that they're gonna remember forever. The other thing too is they're not really gonna care about your technical specs. They're really not gonna think about like how many pixels are being pushed or polygons in that thing, especially if they're seeing it for 15 minutes. They're gonna care about an immersive experience that they just can't believe happened. They wanna step outside of their normal everyday life. This is also an extension of the service industry as attractions. So players will leave, feedback and tell their friends about a good experience. They will also leave the worst reviews ever on Yelp about a bad experience. And that will be bad because you also have to consider about designing for the operator. So, like in a lot of cases of traditional arcade machines, the day-to-day operation of these attractions is done by the owner of the facility, the operator. They're what's gonna make or break your game because before the player ever sees it, you have to sell this game to the operator as a good investment. They have to know that they're going to get a return on putting this in their facility. They also have, employees that are gonna need to sell this game to their customers as well. You need to think about how you're gonna make this easy for the operator. Here's some bad examples. Because any downtime for an operator is them losing money. If your game goes down, you need to think about how are we gonna get this back up and running and making money for them as quickly as possible. And because it's a service industry, most of the business is happening at nights and weekends. So support is a really big key. Some of the things you're gonna wanna consider when designing your game is how are they gonna start it up in the morning and shut it down at night? How are they gonna monitor the game in progress? How are they gonna help the customers to enjoy the game? So we found, especially at MagiQuest, that this meant we had to give them tools for giving the players hints, tools for cheating on the player's behalf, and a lot of training in our game. Because of the seasonal turnover of employees in this industry especially, you need to have a quick way to get those new employees up to speed on how to sell your game, how to operate your game, and to be experts in the game without them actually having to play the game for hours on end. The last design consideration I'm going to talk about is designing for survival. So these games are being installed in heavily trafficked public spaces, and wear and tear is a real issue. Monitors are especially vulnerable. It really, really pays off to spend more money up front and buy commercial grade hardware that can be easily cleaned. I mean, if you've ever been at a resort or on a cruise when they had a norovirus outbreak, they go to a protocol where they're cleaning every 2 hours. And if you've installed a monitor that they can't clean with normal cleaning products, they are gonna be very upset. So will their guests. So you have to take that into consideration. Another tip we found from Creative Kingdoms is that desktop computers are far more reliable hardware-wise than tablet PCs. Tablet PCs are cheaper. You think like, great, low form factor, put it in anything. They flake out all the time. This kiosk from Magic Quest Chronicles Rise of the Totem Master, what do you think that little dome is up there for? Close. It's not aesthetic. Underneath that slab of rock is an RFID reader writer, and we were afraid that without anything on top of it, it would easily become a cup holder. So we solved that problem by putting a dome over it. So that's some of it. As we were talking about the downtime, you need to build tools to be able to remotely support. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, if you worked for me at Creative Kingdoms, you may be making a cameo appearance in these pictures. So you need to think about how you're going to remotely support this. There are tools out there such as Remote Desktop, TeamViewer, and Case System Management, which is a proprietary hardware tool for administering computers remotely. This is actually a pretty big DevOps challenge. Magic Quest locations tended to have about 20 PCs, sometimes up to 40 installed in a location. And so we used both a base computer image to get our computers just with the normal drivers configuration, and then a series of network installers. So for both installation, this is us prepping Magic Quest installs to go out, where we would push the game and configuration files for each individual station via a network installer. We would also use that for remote updates, where you log into a site and you're like, I have new content to push or a bug fix. That's how we got the scalability. So you have to think about, what am I going to do when I need to push an update to this? What am I going to do when hardware breaks as well? Like, what is your plan for replacing this PC in this kiosk when its hard drive fries? So computer imaging is a good tool for that. It's surprisingly hard to get a computer image right, though. I think we went through about 3 iterations, and there was always some setting that never got set. So that is the design considerations. Now on to the fun part, the technology. Technology for immersion. We are very, very used to having screens in our homes and in our hands these days. Coin-op arcades are pretty much entirely unimpressive to anybody who grew up with a smartphone. I asked my 10-year-old what he thought, and he did that. So they're really looking for experiences that transcend what they can get in the everyday. So how do you do that? Well, one way is to go super high tech, right? Like a good example is the Void. They have their proprietary VR system, they have their built-out facility. That's really high tech. There's also companies out there that will sell you pretty much anything. There's awesome animatronics, there's off-the-shelf VR, there's 3D monitors, there's giant half-dome projector screens that you can buy. We had like hologram machines that are really just a projector and like a Pepper's Ghost technique. So you can build or buy pretty much anything you want. Magic Quest also relied on our own proprietary patented hardware for our magic wands, our activation devices, our effect controllers. And this technology is really powerful. Like, there is nothing else out there like a Magic Quest wand. However, it comes at a really high cost in research and development. So you have to design all this proprietary hardware, then you have to communicate with manufacturers about how you're going to get it manufactured, go through the test process, and if you're manufacturing in China, you have additional shipping time as well that you need to figure in. All of that is a really long lead time up to getting your game out there. And after all of that, you are pretty much married to that technology for the long haul, because anything you do is going to incur the same costs over again, or nearly. So you have to be sure that that's what you want to do, but it still can create a really great experience. There are some off-the-shelf technologies, especially with Arduino and Raspberry Pi, that can almost replicate this, but this actually does turn out cheaper if you're going super scalable. Like, we could not replicate what this board does with a Raspberry Pi cheaper. Anyway, so if you don't want to go super high tech, what can you do? Well, if we're aiming here for an immersive experience, it's a bit like a magic trick. You can sometimes do that with just illusion and redirection. Think of escape rooms. Most of these are decidedly low technology. They work by isolating you into this heavily themed environment, involving you with the storyline, and presenting you with physical problems to solve. You may have to search around and decrypt something to find a combination for a lock. But most of it is very low tech. You can also disguise typical technology as something more magical. These are two examples of magical paintings. One is from Disney World and the other one is a MagiQuest one. Behind the MagiQuest screen, we actually had a very small desktop computer shoved behind there so that you could interact with this painting, the magic wand, and it would talk to you and give you prizes and things like that. There's also fun takeaway. These are fun because they allow the user to take something home as well. So these little statuettes have RFID chips in them. RFID chips are extremely cheap, like 50 cents or less, and they store data, so that's fun. You can use a pretty standard RFID reader-writer that attaches to a computer to read and write them. Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom relies on image recognition of your favorite Disney characters. So these are all pretty low-cost things that you can integrate with off-the-shelf technology, but still provide a magical experience. One last picture before I go. This picture was actually taken by one of our games at Great Wolf of me and my daughter. So this was another takeaway that we would do, is we'd have photo booth style things or certificates that were emailed to the player. It's a really simple but yet magical thing for them to have that happen. And I think I really speed talked that. So thank you very much. Questions? Yeah.
So you said on the point about you couldn't replicate what the wand did, with the Arduino or Raspberry Pi, or you used your proprietary stuff. I'm just not super familiar with exactly what it is. So what was it that the wand did?
So the wand, it's a patented technology. Creative Kingdoms owns like a huge amount of patents. So I can't tell you exactly what it does, but you could go read the patent. You can replicate it with an Arduino, yes, but you could not do it for as cheap.
Yeah,
and
just like at a high level, like a kid does this and that. Okay, so it detects motion and stuff?
Yeah, so the MagiQuest wand actually detects 3 separate motions.
Okay.
And yeah, it's cool, but I mean, the key part about it being manufactured in China was that we could buy them in bulk and then sell them. That was actually one of the hugest revenue streams for MagiQuest, is the ancillary revenue, the selling of the wands and the toppers and the t-shirts and the stuffed animals. So that's something I didn't quite get into my talk, is that an operator of these locations is going to want to sell things related to your attraction. And that's sometimes the biggest revenue stream, because if you can get them to add another $15 onto whatever they just paid to play the game, that's great. So, more questions?
A lot of traditional arcade games have an attract loop.
Mm-hmm.
Did MagiQuest have equivalent of people?
We did have an attract loop, and it drove the resorts nuts. This game that took this picture is called the Adventures of the Clubhouse Crew, and it's a Great Wolf branded thing, and it sang. Every 30 minutes, all the kiosks sang, "It's the Clubhouse Crew, what else you want to do?" And the employees were like, "Can you turn that off?" So, yeah, so we did use attract loops. There was definitely, the dragon for MagiQuest was always asleep in his cave, breathing heavily until you woke him up. There was, we experimented with all sorts of things. Our Kennedy Space Center game would play a little advertisement every few minutes off its main kiosks. So, yeah, we totally stole that from the coin ops.
Question. So you said there's something like potentially dozens of pieces of hardware involved in the install. Saw pictures of clearly multiple human beings involved.
Yeah.
How many people, how many days to go from an empty space to this thing's up and running?
It depended on the game. We did actually do one MagiQuest conversion in 2 weeks, where so while I was at Creative Kingdoms, we had created a new version of MagiQuest. The original one was all live action video, and used video streamers. So we are converting to the new version with the front end in Unity and stuff. So we went into an existing location, and over their closed week, we tore all the old stuff out and put the new stuff in, and we're able to get it mostly up and running by the end of that week, and then bug fixed for the next week. So it
How many people did that take?
that one, I don't know. Shaq, do you remember? Williamsburg?
It's probably 6 to 7 people.
Yeah, 6 to 7 people. For our like Kennedy Space Center Cosmic Quest install, that was probably like, yeah, we had like yeah.
I don't remember.
I think there was like about a month. But that one also had like some really intense build out with the rocket launcher took a lot longer to get up. If you saw the thing in the beginning of my talk, oh well, that was part of Cosmic Quest. But this rocket launcher at the beginning, that thing had a smoke machine and a rumbling floor and like 2 monitors and a camera, so you can see me. I launched the rocket and it took your picture and it gave you a certificate and all of this. So when the rocket launches were rumbling, and that thing was insane to put together. So, yeah.
At what point did you guys start working with the physical exhibit design? Does that happen right at the beginning as you're starting to conceive of the project?
Yeah. So the Kennedy game is an interesting example. Like, we were starting pitching that when I came on, and we pitched them something that was totally different from what we ended up installing. And they came back to us and they said, it's not big enough. It's not NASA enough. We need something high tech. And then we started making up stuff like, we could make a rocket launcher with a rumbling floor. And then we did, and the hologram machines and the big half dome projector. So we pitched them all that stuff. And then we thought, oh, now we have to make that stuff. Fortunately, we worked with a really great partner called the Weber Group, who does architecture and installation stuff for attractions. They'd worked for Great Wolf a lot, so they designed this. There's another company that we worked with called Funco, or Fun Company in Wisconsin, that designs kiosks and arcade machine cabinets. So they've designed several things for Creative Kingdoms. So yeah, we sort of dreamed up what the exhibit should look like, and then found people to build it. And then it was a iterative process. So Weber Group would be like, here's our designs, and we'd be like, and Kennedy Space Center would be like, we need more orange or something. So, yeah. Yeah.
Something like the Kennedy Space Center obviously is sort of a one-off, but for ones that are going to get installed in more than one place, did you have to have any considerations about like flexibility in terms of the physical space that you were installing in, or was it more like you can say if you want to buy this, you have to have a room shaped like this? Or? Yeah,
so most of our stuff, when it was at scale, went into Great Wolf Resorts. So they did have some uniformity in how they're laid out, but we did have to think about being flexible of like, we'd get out the big blueprints of the new Great Wolves and like try to fit all our kiosks in there with the set we knew we needed for Magic Quest, and then try to find places for them. So we didn't actually specify what the location should look like. It was more like, we'll help you fit this into your location. Part of the beauty of Magic Quest and those live action games is they turn non-revenue generating spaces into revenue generating spaces, which is the huge attraction for Great Wolf, because it's like, well, we have a little niche between the elevators. It could just sit there, or it could have a dragon in it. So that was what we did. Yeah. But then we did have to design out, like, how are we going to theme these spaces, because theming was very important. So. All right. Any more questions?